The Vampire Diaries is a show about mirrors. The series contains so many different parallels that it gets to the point where almost every character and relationship is a subversion of another, allowing the show to explore themes of identity, destiny, and choice. The biggest examples of this are the parallels drawn between protagonist Elena Gilbert and her mystical doppelganger, Katerina Petrova, also known as Katherine Piece. The two women mirror one another in many ways, but are simultaneously so different that they become inverse mirrors of one another, and this odd contradiction produces some of the most interesting parallels of the series. The mirror inverses of Katherine and Elena can be seen through their personality traits, their individual choices, their respective relationships with the Salvatores, and, by extension, the effects that both women have on the brothers. To look at the inverses, we first have to look at the similarities.
How do we look exactly alike?
Along with their identical physical appearances, the two women share many similarities in both their circumstances and their personalities. Both women suffer through abrupt and brutal losses early in life, and both are orphaned at a very young age. Because of their supernatural doppelganger nature, they are both targeted by the psychotic vampire Klaus and intended as a sacrifice in order for him to break the curse placed upon him. Both women experience deep and obsessive love during their lives, and both are deeply affected by this love, a love which happens to be for the same brothers.
Oh. It's okay to love them both. I did.
The two women also share personality traits. They are both strong-willed and stubborn and utterly ruthless when it comes to getting what they want, such as Elena helping Jeremy wipe out an entire vampire bloodline in order to find the cure to vampirism, or Katherine leaving dozens of vampires to desiccate in a tomb in order to escape when the townsfolk discover her vampire nature. They are both passionate and driven and extremely intelligent, and both contain an uncanny ability to read people well, which allows them to manipulate others easily. We see both women manipulate the Salvatores, particularly Damon, whose emotions leave him more open to said manipulation.
You and Katherine have a lot more in common than just your looks.
However, even with all these similarities, the doppelgangers have many differences, to the point where they become inverses of one another. Katherine is selfish, and this selfishness is one of her most prominent traits. Throughout the series, we see that she always looks out for number one, and consistently puts her needs above the needs and lives of others. Meanwhile, Elena is selfless to a fault. If someone she loves is in danger, she will not hesitate to throw herself under the bus for them, and she always places more importance on the lives of those she loves than on her own, often to her own detriment.
It's either me or my family. So this whole charade was some suicide mission so that you could sacrifice yourself and save everyone else.
Both women have points in their narratives where these traits are inversed. Katherine finally gives up her selfish ways in order to be there for her dying daughter, while Elena gives in to her much more selfish desires when her humanity is switched off after she has become a vampire in season 4. Over the seasons, we discover that Katherine is a dangerously meticulous planner and is almost always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. However, she gets thrown off if things don't end up going according to her plans and is often left flustered when forced to improvise. Elena is just as intelligent as Katherine, but she tends to be much more reckless, often rushing into things with little foresight. She is shown to work on impulse rather than thought-out planning, but she often thrives under pressure, being able to think on her feet and adapt quickly, especially in perilous situations where her life is on the line.
You have the Petrova fire.
Both women often end up in positions where their lives are threatened, and death constantly surrounds both characters, once again illustrating the differences between them. Katherine is terrified of death, and many of her actions stem from this, showing how dying is one of her biggest fears. Elena has no fear of death, to the point where one might even consider her to be a bit of a death seeker. These opposing feelings surrounding death lead directly to the ways in which both women are turned into vampires. When we first meet Katherine as a human, she is being pursued by Klaus in order for her doppelganger blood to be used in a sacrificial ritual. Due to her fear of dying during the ritual, Katherine chooses to become a vampire and live an immortal and doomed life.
Please understand.
You have just signed our death sentence.
Better you die than I.
Her fear of death is so great that she genuinely believes that becoming a murderous, immortal creature is the better option. As such, she adapts to becoming a vampire with remarkable ease and actually flourishes as such a creature. Elena, however, is so unafraid of death that she allows herself to die in the place of a friend. When her and Matt's car ends up going off a bridge at the end of season 3, she makes sure that Stefan saves Matt at the expense of not being able to save her. Her lack of fear leads to her drowning while she has vampire blood in her system, turning her against her will. Elena hates being a vampire, struggling greatly with the initial transformation, and she constantly longs for a normal human life and all the choices that came with it.
I was ready to die. I was supposed to die. I don't want to be, I can't be a vampire.
With all this being said, the biggest parallel between the doppelgangers is their shared love for the Salvatore brothers. While both women fall for both brothers, their love for the Salvatores, as well as the effect they have on the brothers and their brotherly bond, once again become inverses. When Stefan first encounters Elena, he believes that she may in fact be Katherine, and he ends up following her for several months in order to ascertain that she is not. Through this, he gets to know Elena and becomes drawn to her, and it is heavily implied that his initial attraction to Elena stems from the fact that she looks exactly like Katherine but is the complete opposite of her.
I watched you. I learned everything that I could about you, and I saw that you were nothing like Katherine. And I wanted to leave town, but Elena, I couldn't leave without knowing you.
When we see their relationship in flashbacks, we discover that Katherine's love for Stefan was extremely damaging to him. Initially presenting herself as a human orphan, Katherine deceived both brothers, and when she revealed her true nature to Stefan, he became terrified of her. In order to keep him under her thumb, Katherine compelled Stefan's fear away, fed off him, and raped him, and she was ultimately responsible for him becoming a vampire. While Stefan did initially genuinely love Katherine without compulsion, she twisted that love and took away Stefan's free will. And, like many abuse victims, Stefan felt great shame and great self-loathing over this.
It wasn't real. I remember you compelling me.
Only after I showed you who I really was.
Well, whatever feelings I had back then, they all turned to hate.
When he falls for Elena, he falls for her not only because she is so different to Katherine, but because she treated him so differently within their relationship. With Elena, Stefan always had rights, and, more importantly, free will. Elena always considered Stefan and his feelings, and she showed him kindness, compassion, and genuine care. In opposition of Katherine's selfish love, Elena's love for Stefan was selfless and healing, and exactly what Stefan needed. He needed to know that someone as good and selfless as Elena could love him, because Katherine's selfishness damaged him so badly and made him hate himself so much. In being with Elena, Stefan was able to heal from the scars left from Katherine. Damon's love for Katherine and Elena was very different to Stefan's, and the inverse of Katherine and Elena for Damon was not about Katherine being selfish and evil and Elena being selfless and good. The inverse with Damon came from him getting the girl, from Elena choosing him over Stefan, where Katherine always chose Stefan.
It was always Stefan.
This ends up being healing for Damon because he lost himself to Katherine to such an extent that her rejection of him brought out some of his ugliest and most violent responses. Damon seemed to love Katherine too much, an obsessive and deep love which allowed him to see her true nature and still desire her. One gets the impression that Damon would have done anything and everything to be with Katherine and would have crossed anyone who tried to stand in the way of that. He loved Elena to the same degree, but where Katherine was turned off by this dark and deep love and used it to manipulate and pull Damon's strings, Elena was attracted to it, and because she is such a good person, she unknowingly forced Damon's good side to the surface, so his obsessive and passionate love became good under Elena's influence, the opposite of Katherine, who brought out the worst in him.
I
I've been a vampire for a long time, Elena. It's been a blast. But I would give it up in a second to be your husband, your partner, father of your kids.
When Katherine chose Stefan over Damon time and again, it made Damon feel inferior to his brother, which made him turn on Stefan and hate himself, feeling that he was unworthy of love. Elena ultimately choosing Damon in the present helped him to realize that he was worthy of love, that someone could choose him over Stefan, and that he didn't have to live in his brother's shadow for the rest of his life. Once again, where Katherine destroyed a Salvatore with her love, Elena healed him with hers. Elena and Katherine both affect the relationship between the brothers, and, once again, the way they affect the relationship is an inverse. Both brothers loved both women. Katherine was well aware of this fact and used it to her advantage, sowing quiet discord between the two and keeping them away from each other in order to maintain control over both of them.
You have no idea of the future I have planned for us, Stefan. You, me, and Damon.
Elena was also aware that both brothers loved her, but unlike Katherine, she never tried to manipulate those feelings to her own advantage. While she did sometimes use Damon's feelings for her to force him to do the right thing, she never tried to separate the brothers from one another or turn them against each other, and ultimately, her love was actually what brought them back together, an inverse of how Katherine tore them apart. By turning the brothers into vampires, Katherine brought Stefan's worst qualities to the surface. As a vampire, Stefan was initially dangerous and reckless, and entirely too comfortable with the violent and bloodthirsty nature of being such a creature. Even though Damon had accepted death, Stefan refused to face the loss of his brother, and he manipulated Damon into becoming a vampire, creating deep resentment in Damon, which lasted for decades.
So you're still mad at me?
Why would I be mad at you, Stefan? You made me become a vampire, and now I walk the world alone, drinking other people's blood.
When Stefan's Ripper persona came out in full, it horrified Damon so much that Damon ran from him. Seeing Stefan at his worst fractured the brothers and tore them apart, and Damon later embracing his worst self and becoming the monster that Stefan initially was, is what kept them apart. Stefan suffered great guilt over turning Damon and constantly blamed himself for many of Damon's actions. When they returned to Mystic Falls, Elena's love ended up bringing out the best in Damon and let Stefan see that he hadn't completely ruined his brother with his actions, therefore allowing himself to forgive himself and heal from the past. While Damon seeing the worst come out in Stefan tore them apart, Stefan seeing the best in Damon brought them back together. And Stefan wouldn't have seen this best part of Damon without Elena's love to bring it out. It's a beautiful mirror to their relationship with Katherine, the woman who tore them apart versus the woman who brought them back together, seeing the worst versus seeing the best. In a series about mirrors where almost every character reflects another, Katherine and Elena are the best example of this. The doppelgangers work as perfect foils for one another, with parallel lives and romances, showing how each could have given in to their opposite desires and traits, but instead made completely different choices in life, and as a result, ended up with very different fates.